A few years ago, I worked at this strange American Eagle store not that far outside my hometown. I was short on money and figured the job would be fun considering my love for fashion. During my first week there I was informed by one of the employees, who we'll call Dave, about a creepy painting in the far back near the changing rooms. Dave advised me not to look at it for too long and to pretend it's not even there. I found this a little unsettling at first, but ultimately forgot about it. In my mind, I figured Dave was just a jokester and was trying to scare me for his pure amusement. A few weeks later, another employee, who we shall call Kate, started to talk about the painting during our lunch break. I laughed thinking her and Dave were pranking me or something, but her face turned icy and cold. "Don't believe me? Then look for yourself," she said before getting up for the bathroom. I was intrigued, so out of pure curiosity, I walked over to the back where they both told me it would be. I haven't really had the need to go back there yet, so this was the first time I saw it. The painting was of a man walking his dog. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. I stared at it and shook my head. I was a little disappointed. I went to walk away, but this chill ran down my spine that made me turn around. The dog that was once on a leash held by the man was now walking freely with his teeth in a snarl. The man himself seemed to be looking into my soul. My lunch break was soon over and I tried not to think about the painting and how it seemed to change by itself. At the end of my work shift, before heading home, I decided to check it out once more. To my surprise, the dog was back on its leash and looked as happy as ever. That's when my eyes jumped up to where the man was. He was smiling with all his teeth showing. He was not like this before. His eyes looked to be the darkest shade of gray, and he was holding the dog's leash with just one finger. I closed my eyes trying to remember if this was what it originally looked like, but my gut told me to keep my eyes closed. I started to hear shuffling in one of the changing rooms closest to me. The only ones left in the store were me and Kate. I said her name out loud, hoping to God that she was the one I was hearing. There was no response. A cold breeze washed over my face. I squeezed my eyes shut even tighter out of fear. After what seemed like hours, I opened my eyes. I let out a gasp as I looked at the painting in front of me. I know this is going to sound crazy, but you have to believe me. The painting in front of me was of an old woman holding a basket of flowers with a bright smile on her face. She seemed to be smiling back at me. I ran over to Kate, who I knew would believe me, and told her what had happened. She nodded and said, and I quote, "It does that." I asked her why they don't just take it down, and she froze. Her eyes started to tear up and she looked over my shoulder. I don't know what it is she saw, and I guess I'll never know, because at that very moment I grabbed my jacket, phone, and car keys, and walked out the door. I know it sounds like a bitch move, but by the look in Kate's eyes, it wasn't her that was in trouble. I waited in the parking lot to make sure Kate got out okay before driving off. I quit a few days later. Those last few days I avoided the painting with great ease. That is, until Dave asked me to get a few hangers from the back. I hesitated but decided it wasn't that big of a deal. As soon as I made my way to the back, I halted to a stop. The painting was gone. I asked Kate and Dave about it, and they both looked at me confused. "What painting?" Dave asked, tilting his head. I stared at him in shock. I looked over to Kate for her help, but she seemed just as confused as Dave was. I begged them both to tell me they were kidding, but they seemed really adamant on the fact that there was no such painting. A month later, I came to the store with my little cousin to get her some clothes for the summer. I let her do her thing and looked around the place. Come to find out, Kate quit shortly after I left without any explanation. Dave, however, was still folding clothes in the men's section. I walked over to him and we started catching up. My little cousin signaled that she was done, and I said goodbye to Dave. However, as soon as I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm firmly. I looked at him with a raised eyebrow. He pulled me close and whispered something in my ear that I'll never forget. "It waits for you in the back." He then dropped my arm and picked up another shirt to fold. I slowly walked away and headed for the cashier, but something pulled me over to that back area. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was pure stupidity. When I got there, I was met face to face with the painting. It was just black. A black background and a frame on a wall. I looked at it, contemplating whether or not I should inspect it. That's when my cousin ran up to me with all her clothes in hand. She turned to see what I was looking at and smiled. "What a nice painting of a man and his dog," she said. My stomach dropped. I pulled her by her arm and quickly paid for the clothes. We got the hell out of there as fast as we could. It's been a little over 3 years now, but the whole situation still makes me nauseous. I haven't and will never go back to the place, because I never, and I mean never, want to see the painting in the back again. It was a dark and stormy night at the office. Most of the employees had gone home, leaving only a few brave souls working late. Among them was Emma, a young woman who had just started working at the company a few weeks ago. Emma was typing away on her computer when she heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, as if someone was trying to be quiet. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine, but she tried to ignore it and focus on her work. But the footsteps grew louder, and soon Emma could hear the sound of heavy breathing. She looked up from her computer and saw a shadowy figure moving towards her. Emma's heart began to race as she realized that there was someone, or something, in the office with her. The figure came closer, and Emma could see that it was a man with a twisted and contorted face, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Emma tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was frozen with fear, unable to move or even breathe. The man moved closer and closer, until he was standing right in front of Emma. She could feel his cold breath on her face, and she could smell the stench of death and decay emanating from him. Emma closed her eyes, waiting for the worst. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. Emma opened her eyes and looked around the room, but there was no sign of the man. She could still feel his presence, though, and she knew that she was not alone. Emma quickly gathered her things and ran out of the office, never looking back. She never went back to that office again, and she never talked about what had happened to her that night. But she knew that something evil had been lurking in the shadows, and she could still feel its presence even now, years later. Emma tried to shake off the feeling of fear that had gripped her and walked towards the door. As she reached for the handle, she heard a low growl coming from behind her. She spun around and saw the figure once again, its twisted face contorted in rage. This time Emma didn't hesitate. She ran out of the office, slamming the door behind her. She didn't stop running until she was outside in the pouring rain, panting and shivering with fear. After a few minutes, Emma managed to calm down enough to call the police. When they arrived, she told them what had happened, but they didn't believe her. They searched the office, but found no evidence of anyone else being there. Emma was left feeling alone and terrified, with no one to turn to. Over the next few weeks, strange things began to happen at the office. Lights would flicker on and off, objects would move by themselves, and employees reported feeling an eerie presence. Emma knew that the figure she had seen was responsible, but no one else seemed to believe her. One night, Emma decided to stay late at the office again, hoping to catch a glimpse of the figure and prove to everyone that she wasn't crazy. She sat at her desk, watching and waiting, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, she heard the sound of footsteps once again. This time, she didn't feel as scared as before. She stood up and faced the figure, ready to confront it. But when the figure came into view, Emma realized that it was not a man at all. It was something far more terrifying, a creature from another world, with razor-sharp claws and teeth, and eyes that glowed like fire. Emma tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It pounced on her, pinning her to the ground with its immense weight. Emma could feel its hot breath on her face, and she knew that she was about to die. But then, out of nowhere, a bright light appeared, blinding the creature and causing it to recoil. Emma took the opportunity to run, sprinting towards the door as fast as she could. When she looked back, the creature was gone, and the office was once again empty. Emma never went back to the office again, but the memory of that night stayed with her forever. She knew that there were things in this world that were far beyond our understanding, and that sometimes the line between reality and horror was thin indeed.